Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Amplify Your Business. Today, I'm sitting down with Hilary Sweet. She is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Kidney-Chek. Welcome to the show, Hilary.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And so I like to ask everybody when they first sit down with me, what are three things that every entrepreneur needs to know? What would you say to that?
Great starting point. There's definitely things that I've learned along the way that I wish I had have known at the beginning of this journey.
Yeah.
One thing that has been a big learning point for us, because my co-founder and I both have technical backgrounds and both did Ph.D s in point of care diagnostics. We started out thinking if we can just invent this product and get the technology and show the science behind how it works, then we're good. We've got it. And now that we're in this sales and marketing point, that's something that we didn't realize how difficult it was and didn't spend enough energy on the sales and marketing side earlier on to make it easier for us now that we do have the product. So I would say one big point was, it's not just about the technology, it's also about the customer discovery and how you're going to sell it and your messaging and all of that. Sales and marketing package there. That's been a huge learning point for us. The second thing I would say is, which I knew, but I didn't realize the importance of it, is kind of surrounding yourself with mentors and people. And for startups, especially, just like that sense of community has been so helpful. Just getting together with people and hearing what's worked for them and what hasn't. I think for myself, it's so encouraging and everyone's so motivating, and it's great to hear other people's stories. So I think really having that network is big. Yep. And then the third piece I would say is just really, it's hard to narrow it down to just three because there's so many things that are coming to mind. But if I had to pick one more, I would say just kind of going back to the customer discovery and the validation early on. That's something that we did spend a fair bit of time on, but hindsight, I think we could have spent a little bit more on that. And I think it's so important to really understand what the customer wants and who your customer is. Because I know for us, you kind of get in the trees and you don't always take the time to pull yourself back and look at the bigger picture. And think about am I doing this for a purpose? If I only had 1 month left of money or funding, what would I be spending? What's the critical tasks that my customer wants or that I need to be propelling the company forward? So I guess not only the customer discovery and the importance of that, but really just time is so important, and really focusing in on what's going to progress your business in the next month or week. And doing those things is really important.
Great advice. And speaking of your business then, what is it that Kidney-Chek does, or what problem is it that you're trying to solve?
The problem that we're trying to solve is pets are very good at hiding signs of illness. And so oftentimes pet owners think their animal's healthy. And, even if you are going into the vet for your annual wellness exam, when your pet gets to be 7 years or older, they'll start offering you things like blood work and, kind of preventative or health checks. And oftentimes people will either say no to that or can't afford it because it's, can be up to $300-400. And so one of the big illnesses, especially for cats, is kidney disease that goes undiagnosed. So 1 in 3 cats will get kidney disease in their lifetime, and 1 in 10 dogs. And so we learned about this problem and how it was going undetected. And then what we decided to work on was a solution for that. And so we've come up with a quick and affordable screening tool that pet owners can use at home.
Really interesting. And so is there a reason why you decided to focus on the pet side of it versus the human side of diagnostics?
It's kind of been this winding journey, but my co-founder and I were focused on point of care detection platforms for clinical space, so for humans. And then when we ambitiously decided to start a company and we went out looking for problems, we very quickly learned about the regulatory hurdles that would come along with
Mm.
diagnostics for humans. And so that was one of the big factors that kind of deterred us. And then the more we started talking to people in the pet industry, we learned about the need for innovation in that space. And so it was kind of a few things that led us there, but the regulatory barrier was a big one. And just not having, like, we didn't have the experience with starting a company. And then on top of that, the regulatory. So naturally, we just kind of started looking for problems in the pet industry that were a little bit, maybe, I don't know if less ambitious is the right word, but seemed to be more attainable
Than in human trials and stuff. Yeah. So when it comes to the problem, looking for that problem, is that the way that you had approached things, where you knew that you wanted to, be an entrepreneur, you wanted to have a business, you wanted to solve some sort of problem, and so you were hunting for a problem? Or is this a problem that you discovered first and you decided that there was a business opportunity within this?
We set out looking for problems. We had both myself and Matt had worked for a company previously for a short period of time where they were doing the opposite. And we were trying to take this product that we had and find problems we could solve with it. And we found that very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had intentionally decided to start the company and go out looking for problems and kind of follow that. I think it's Steve Blank that kind of talks through that problem first and then come up with the solution. So we did a lot of business model canvases for different problems and tried to kind of look at what was feasible and what we thought we could actually realistically invent. And that's how we started.
So what made you decide that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, that you wanted to solve problems out there, find business opportunities from those problems? Is that something that has always been, a passion or desire of yours, or is this something that you've kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship as well along the way?
We both kind of, Matt and I both kind of stumbled into it. Our supervisor during our graduate degrees was a previous inventor and wasn't your traditional academic. He had spent a lot of time in industry, was the inventor of a nanocrystalline silver wound bandage that's now sold by Smith & Nephew worldwide. And so from the beginning of our graduate program all the way through, he was always, asking us questions and challenging us to think a little bit more about how it could be more than just research in the lab that we were doing. And so that kind of, I think, got both of us subconsciously thinking about and enjoying that, because it was so fun working with him. And it was Dr. Rob Burrell, but I think he kind of got that desire started. And so when we set out looking for job opportunities and kind of looked at what we could do, it just seemed like a fun challenge and a way to really learn so many different skills, as opposed to, for myself, I never had the desire to stay in a traditional academic setting. And so it sounded like a lot of work, but a lot of fun too. We both love learning. So
yeah, well, obviously you have a lot of learning there, your PhD, right? So that's a commitment on the academics for sure. And so there's a lot of people that are approaching that wanting to go into or stay within academia. So you never had that intention to begin with then?
No, I graduated from my undergrad, and all of the jobs that I was really interested in were kind of medical devices or, things related to like biomedical engineering. My undergrad was mechanical engineering, with a specialization in biomechanical. And so I realized my options were to, take a job that I didn't really love or go get a master's degree in biomedical engineering in order to qualify for these roles that I thought sounded really cool at the time. But during my undergrad, I never saw myself, like I never thought, oh, I'm going to go do a PhD after this. It just kind of was the way that everything unfolded, and my supervisor was really great. So I decided to transfer from a master's right into a PhD, but would not have expected that to be my path.
So you shared before we hit the record button that you've been at this business for a little over, well, 3.5 years, I think you said. So closing in on the 4-year mark. What has been some of the biggest challenges that you have had to overcome as you transition from academia and research and inventing into actually starting and running and growing a business?
There's so many things that come up that, like, my people, Matt and I, will look at each other and be like, why is there no course on this? Like, why is this just not a course that everyone has to take, whether it's in high school or your undergrad? Because everything from like psychology, like there's so many things that would be helpful to understand the decisions that people make and just how we live, that tie into a business and that you kind of need to be aware of. We recently, I mean, there was obviously challenges in developing the technology, but those challenges, we felt like we had the background to kind of work through and iterate on in the lab. The other challenges have been more on like understanding, do's and don'ts of product packaging and what you need to have on, and how your consumer interacts with your product, or how do you get them to engage and make them more aware. So that's not like a single challenge, but there is just so many, to like a roundabout way to answer your question. There is just so many things that would have been helpful to have as even just a little course, like a tidbit of that information going into this.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the last 3.5 years. And so you identified a problem, you solved it in the lab, and then you decided then to commercialize that. And so now you're at a point where I think I saw an announcement recently where you're in store now. There's a few stores around the Edmonton area, but I think right across Canada, right? That you are now selling your tests within.
So we launched as of November 1st into 10 different stores across, actually 9, sorry. No, we're in 10 now. 10 stores across Canada. And we've chosen kind of Edmonton and Ontario as the 2 locations that we're doing some trials in. Mm-hmm. And so the goal of that is to really kind of, one was to make sure that our pricing was in the right ballpark, and just get feedback from not only the staff and the owners of these stores, but also the customers that they're talking to on a daily basis, who are coming in and maybe they're seeing, things like frequent urination or increased drinking in their pet, but maybe it's just their pet is 7 or older and becoming is at a higher risk of getting kidney disease. So just getting some early feedback there was the hope of that product launch, which has been really great so far. And then the goal is to have some distributors start to take our product to all the stores kind of across Canada, just so that we, as a small team, we don't have the ability to, span Canada and do all of that ourselves. So we would have some reps and things like that, staff at these stores helping us out. But that's really just been the last kind of few months we've really gotten to that point. Mm-hmm. There was probably about a year, 8 months to a year of customer discovery and going out and just talking to people to come up with, what problems are out there, what could we try and solve. And then it was probably around like the 8 month to a year mark that we got in the lab and started, we built up a lab in a garage, Matt's father's garage. He was generous enough to let us have some lab benches and set up our equipment in there. And then we just started iterating and doing lab testing to see if it was, what solution we could come up with and invent. And then kind of the next few years was everything from developing IP and branding and like shelf life testing of your product. You need to know how long it's going to be good on the shelves. Lots of different pieces. And then in January, we did launch to some vet clinics as well. And so the last kind of 2022 has been really trying to raise awareness and get sales and try different things. So
yeah, one thing that you did touch on there where I'd like to dig a little bit deeper is you were talking about just trying to determine, if you have it priced properly, essentially. So can you walk us through, I think a new category of product even. Is there any competitors in the marketplace for what you guys are offering right now?
there is no saliva
Yeah.
test that looks for the marker that we have. There are some urine strips that would be the closest comparison, I would say.
Okay. And so there are alternatives in the marketplace, but nothing that you're, I guess, directly going to head against in your particular category. And so how do you address that pricing equation? What methodology were you using? How did you inform yourself on that?
That's a conversation that we have had with lots of people, is just trying to pick people's brains on what they've done to get to their pricing model. And I mean, at times it seems very arbitrary, but what we did to try and get some validation to ourselves that we're in the right ballpark was a survey. So we had sent out to a number of people a survey that allowed them to share some information about how much they spend on their pet, what they're open to spending for a test that's going to, like a screening test that's not replacing blood work. And then we looked at, this was like a fairly small sample size, but we looked at how many people would pay at different price points, and then looked at, what captured the majority of people, but wasn't underpricing the product. That was one thing that we did earlier on to get kind of a ballpark. And then we also, the closest comparison is kind of looking at those urine test strips as well as blood testing. So if you go to the vet and I want to get just that like basic panel, it's like $80, and that's not including your $60 vet appointment and your collection fee. So we kind of looked at the high end and then looked at what other indirect competitors were pricing their products at, and then tried to pick something that was, in that middle range, but also making sure that it was giving us a sustainable business model as well. So I don't think we, have nailed that down by any means, but a few other kind of key things that we've learned through having pricing discussions with people is just, I think going into it, we felt like it had to be this, if we don't get this perfect off the start, everything's gonna collapse. And that's not the case at all. Like we've done a few changes to our pricing model, and it's flexible. And I think that's something that, if you talk to someone about getting a pricing study done, it's like $10,000 when you can just trial it on your e-commerce store, change the pricing, see how how many more conversions do you get, or how does it affect your conversion rate? And so it's definitely been an area that we've been trying to kind of learn ourselves. But I think that it's just something that we maybe stressed ourselves out a little bit too much in the beginning. Like, just get your product out there. If no one's buying it, maybe it's the pricing and you can always drop it. It's not like a rigid thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned your e-commerce store, and so you're selling online as well as through a distribution network as well, or to retailers, right? And so, is that going to be the long-term plan where you're doing both, or is it going to be something where you're going to really skew most of your attention towards the retail distribution? Where do you see the opportunity in the future from a selling standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, initially we started with selling to vet clinics because that seemed like a natural fit, would be to have vets offer this to pet owners who either can't bring their animal in. There's lots of cats who just get too stressed, or if they can't financially afford it, they could send Kidney-Chek home with them. And that's still something that we see being a valuable tool. It does seem like it's a slower adoption to get into vet clinics, and they're just extremely understaffed right now. So I think that's something that we are kind of thinking about, is like, how do we incorporate and what is our main channels? The launch of our e-commerce platform was very helpful from a standpoint of getting the product into the hands of users and demonstrating some value, and offering people a way to get their hands on the product.
Yeah.
But we're learning that, it's very hard to, you're spending so much money to try and reach, across Canada, let alone globally, with a direct to consumer platform. So we are trying to establish some different partnerships through other companies, but then also through retail and vet channels to just help us get the product into the hands of pet owners to screen for kidney illness.
Yeah, one of the things that I really like to see a lot of our customers who are doing something that could be direct to consumer or done through distribution is when you're starting to try to figure out that pricing equation and really establishing what that value proposition is. The online store gives you a lot of opportunity to do that experimenting and to really determine, okay, well, what kind of messaging is actually resonating with the consumer, and which pricing models are going to work the best. And in terms of like split testing that, it's just really easy to do the research through those online means sometimes, which allows you to then extrapolate that and build out then a better system of pricing and messaging and packaging and everything else for the distribution network, so that you can support the bigger push through there. So I really like that approach that you guys took in terms of using both avenues as part of your customer validation process and pricing validation processes.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too, about you get feedback so quickly on, something like an e-commerce store or even like using an Amazon platform, and you can iterate so much more quickly and get a larger sample size. So it's definitely been helpful for us as well.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned at the very beginning when I was asking you those, 3 things that you think every entrepreneur needs to know, you were talking about the customer validation. You wish that you would have done maybe a little bit of that, more work on that earlier on. Was that beyond the pricing? Was that in the messaging? What can you expand upon that a little bit, just so that we better understand what you meant there?
I think that for us, it was more on talking to vets specifically, because we had 4 clinics we were working with. We did our pilot study to, make sure that the test was working and reading what we wanted it to and providing value in terms of kidney function. And everyone wants to be so nice. And we asked a lot of discovery questions of like, would you sell this? How much would you see it selling for? We're like, okay, yes, this is we can have a sustainable business here. These clinics are willing to offer it. But one thing that we didn't do, or that we didn't get to, is that some of those clinics actually don't want to offer it. And so had we dug a little bit deeper and maybe said, okay, could you give us a deposit? Or, like there was some things that we missed in our customer discovery, whether it was the customers were trying to be too nice and we're Canadian and we don't want to say that sucks and I don't want it. We missed that a little bit. So when we got our product, we were like, great, we just need to show these clinics. And some of them just weren't ultimately interested at that time. Again, COVID was a factor as well, and understaffing and all these things. But we were kind of kicking ourselves because we then spent 3 months going out to 80, 90 vet clinics, and the uptake was not what we had expected. So I've since heard a few other companies who have done things like asking for an upfront, purchase order or other forms of commitment that are a little bit more than just someone saying, yeah, I like that, because that's not enough. It's not, you can't keep your business going off of,
empty promises.
Yeah.
And I think this is really the one of the challenges that a lot of businesses get into. So, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a reliance or a need to do, focus groups to really get that market research figured out, right? In terms of, okay, assessing whether or not there was a market fit. and that's essentially what you were doing there, is you were talking to a group of people and vet clinics, it sounds like, and asking them, and they're all positive about it. And they might even say, yeah, no, I'd be really interested in buying it. But until you actually get them to purchase, that their words are meaningless. And that's one of the things that with focus groups, it can really lead you astray. And so that's what I love about, again, another little tip for those who are listening. If you're doing some product research and trying to figure out if there's an actual market for it, before you even develop the product, a person can run some tests from a marketing standpoint to see if there is actually a fit for the product and at what price point before you even venture into development. And so the way that you short circuit that, as a tip, is you basically set up a landing page that is pitching whatever it is the product is that you're trying to pitch to it, and just run a campaign on Facebook even, for put a $500 down in ad spend and see whether or not people are actually clicking through and coming over to the website. So that's a pretty good indicator of interest, so that there might be a good product problem fit, right? That there is actually a market for it. And then you actually have your site set up so that you can transact a sale. So you sell it before it's even made. And then when somebody, does actually purchase it, you give them a refund and you say, oh, sorry, we're sold out right now, or we've run into a production issue, or whatever the excuse is going to be, and refund it to them. But the idea is that sure, you can get people to click through to that site, but until they actually purchase, that's just an indicator of interest, but not an indicator that you actually have the right price, or that they'll actually put money down for it. And so you can want to get to that place where you're actually selling it. And so, like you said, in this situation, because it's more of a wholesale situation, getting that PO and a commitment, a deposit, that's a really good test for it, for sure. And that's where, like, the Kickstarters, I mean, that's why they're so brilliant for entrepreneurs, all those different Kickstarter platforms out there, because before you actually go through the expense of producing something, researching and developing it, you can actually test to see, is there a market there that's willing to pay for it? And they're putting money up front, right? So it's really,
sure.
And that's novel in the last 15, 20 years, where pre-digital means of marketing and crowdfunding and everything else, before that there wasn't an ability to really test that. And so it's really democratized the ability for companies with less research and development funding to be able to get their foot in the marketplace, essentially, and really make some good decisions right off the start. So yeah, that's a really great learning. So thanks for sharing that. I'm really curious, what's easier now for your business at this stage in your business journey? So what's easier now than what it was before?
I mean, one thing that comes to mind is just like basic QuickBooks or, financial bookkeeping, like budgeting and all of that, like getting all of that set up for a business and learning how to track expenses and what you have to track and how to track it and all of that now seems very like, oh, that's easy. Like, we have just done this. Things that we've done, over and over and are kind of a monthly thing have now become like takes half the time of what it, first took me to do. So there's a lot of things that go along with having a business that you just kind of learn to do, and they get easier with time, which is then becomes a really nice reassuring, like, oh, I'm just doing this for an hour today, like this is easy. I can just coast through this. Things like, grant writing has definitely gotten easier for us. We've been really fortunate to have a number of grants that have helped us, get to where we are with non-dilutive funding. So things like that, you kind of struggle through them at the beginning, and then they just become like an easy task that isn't daunting anymore. And there's new things like sales and marketing that is more daunting. So
yeah. And so I guess on the flip side of that, just continue on from there. What do you perceive to be your biggest hurdles or challenges that you're going to have to overcome to get your business to that next level that you want to achieve?
I mean, there's definitely like we're at a pretty fun point, but also I think a critical point, because we have this first product and we're getting it out there. And now it's just deciding how to move forward with that. Is it coming up with next products and moving, like what does the future of our company look like, and where do we want to take it? There's so many different avenues that we could ultimately go down. And so that's kind of the biggest right now challenge, is like, what team would we need to do this way, and what team would we need to do that way, or to go that path. And so it's more of just I would say the bigger picture, because we've been trying to really focus on Kidney-Chek and getting it out there. And now that we, are fairly close, I would say, to having it with some distribution agencies, it's kind of like looking past that to what is the plan for longer term.
The next product and the next product. So you're not planning on being a single product skew, right? Company. You're planning on having a variety of products that you can offer the market.
That was always we've gone back and forth. I mean, initially we thought we would start with this product, and then our next product was going to be a cattle pregnancy test, which we, had some other technology that we were developing for that. And then our thought was, after that, we'll just have this platform for human diagnostics. And so that was, I think, a little bit naive of us, because we didn't realize how hard it is to get into each market segment when we were starting out. And so now that we're very much in the pet industry, I think it makes more sense to, build out some of the other markers that people would like to use that could be done with simple and affordable diagnostics, as opposed to jumping into a completely different, large animal industry or for humans even. So definitely something that in conversations with vets, they'll say, I really would like this cardiac marker, or I would really like this marker. So we kind of just have been writing those ideas down. And but yeah, definitely see the value in having additional products, whether it's for kidney function or other markers entirely.
Final question for you. If you were to write a letter to your younger self, so the Hillary of 3.5 years ago when you were just starting the business, what would you include in that letter to yourself?
There would be lots of things. I think one of the main things would just be kind of like I mentioned earlier about having that focus. I think we've gotten a lot better at really focusing in on what is critical, but I think it's taken kind of the three years. Like, it hasn't been until the last 6 months or so that we've really nailed down our process for, setting outcomes and what's critical and what we're having to do each week. I think early on, there was a lot of things that we let sidetrack us, whether it was, saying yes to meetings, or like, there's just so many things that eat up your time. And I think in a startup, it's really critical to move fast, even if that's failing fast. And so not necessarily thinking about like extending your business just for the sake of it, but like, let's figure out if this is viable. Let's figure out if we can have a sustainable business model off this, and, do the things each week that are like very critical, because time and money, that's like, I think there's things that we could have moved a little bit faster on figuring out.
Yeah. So keep the focus and then move faster is really what I'm hearing from you. Yeah. I think that's really good advice that we can all send back to our younger selves, because distraction is such a curse when it comes to entrepreneurs, I think, because oftentimes we're idea people. We are seeing opportunities all over the place, and sometimes it's really difficult to apply that focus. And then because you have to kind of do it all oftentimes. Even when you are in a partnership like you and your co-founder, there's still, you're involved in so many different things. You're wearing so many different hats that it can be really challenging to know where you need to apply your focus and when, right? Is now the time where I need to be focusing on those, longer term goal planning and setting and really figuring out those objectives that you're going to try to achieve? Or is now the time that I'm in the lab trying to figure out the next solution or the next product, right? The next thing that you're trying to move to the marketplace potentially. So it's got to be difficult, especially when you're in a product in a new category where there is so much of that time that's spent on R&D as well at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Hilary, and sharing a little bit more about your story. It's just really fascinating to see some of the different types of businesses that are launching here in the Edmonton region that have some sort of technology or science base to them. And you guys obviously have a huge market. There's so many people out there with pets who definitely do care very much about them and want to be treating them as best that they can. And so this is a product that I think from a timing standpoint just really seems to be a great, great, well-timed product for the market right now.
Yeah, I like to think so too. So thanks for having me. It was lots of fun to talk about and reflect back on some of the challenges that we've overcome and some of the learnings. So
yeah, so if somebody wanted to reach out to you for a follow-up or wanted to learn more about your product or even purchase it, what's the best way for them to connect with you or to find your product?
Yeah, so there's lots of information on our website. I can share that with you, but it's kidney-chek.com. Chek is spelled C-H-E-K. Lots of information on there, and I'm happy to connect with people either through LinkedIn or through email. And I can share those with you as well.
Sure. Yeah, sounds really good. Well, awesome. I really appreciate it again. And for those of you who are listening today, if you enjoyed this episode and want to check out some of our past episodes as well as our future ones, just head over to amplifyyourbusiness.ca, and that's where you're going to find our full archive. And if you're watching us right now and prefer to listen to it on the go, you can find us by searching Amplify Your Business on your favorite podcasting platform. Until next time, everybody have a prosperous day.